Hey guys, it's Victoria and welcome back to FemmeHead. Today I want to talk about charting after giving birth to a child, but I just want to have a little realistic chat about charting after baby. So I want to start this video by talking about the spectrum of intention of birth control and the spectrum of intention when it comes to trying for a baby. Because when it comes to fertility, we'll start with, you're either on the side of absolutely not, I cannot get pregnant right now, it would be the worst thing ever, it's just not an option. 2, we're actively trying for a baby using ovulation predictor, test kits, timing our sex, charting, all of that. So that's a very broad spectrum. But let's go to the side of birth control. You have the not now, can't happen, to meh, it wouldn't be the end of the world, but we're not trying. And then within the spectrum of trying, there's the ovulation predictor kits, charting, timing sex, all of that good jazz, using every piece of technology and knowledge to your advantage to try to conceive faster. And then there is the, oh, we'll see what happens. We're not trying, but we're not trying, and we're just kind of organically going about it. If we get pregnant, we get pregnant. So there's that spectrum as well. And I think it's important to start with these spectrums. I know I keep saying that because birth control and trying to conceive and this weird world of fertility is not as black and white as people think it is. Or at least me personally, I didn't realize there was so much that went into where you're at mentally trying to conceive and where you're at with birth control. Because if you're on the end of absolutely not, it can't happen, I'm still in school, I'm not in a good relationship, I'm not financially stable, you're obviously going to be much more cautious with your birth control and sexual encounter decisions than someone who is meh, it's not the end of the world if we had a baby right now. So you've had a kid, you've been cleared for sex, what's going on? So postpartum, our hormones are just all over the place, which makes total sense. We have been pregnant for 9 months, filled with juicy, delicious pregnancy hormones, and then all of a sudden it's pop, you give birth, and your body's what the hell? What's going on? I gotta sort myself out. Oh, I've gotta make milk now. It's much more smooth than that, and the body is a beautiful thing, but still we have to give ourselves some grace as our body rebalances its hormones after giving birth. So your cycles might be irregular, inconsistent, or non-existent. I stopped my postpartum bleeding at 6 weeks after having Theo, and I got my first real period 4 weeks later at 10 weeks postpartum. And from that 10-week mark, it pretty much had consistent regular cycles going forward, which I am so grateful for. I know some women don't get their first real period until 8 months postpartum or 16 months postpartum. And so to just rip off the band-aid and get my cycle back, I was cool, I'm okay with that. Let's just get back to business, because it's so much easier to chart your cycle when there is a consistent regular cycle than when your temperature and your cervical fluid is just all over the place. Cervical fluid is the biggest indicator of returning fertility, and it's just the best thing to watch out for. If you've had a child, or a new mom, or anything, you know that consistent sleep, regular sleep is not a thing as a new mom. And trying to get a consistent, accurate basal body temperature each morning is next to impossible with a newborn baby. Yes, there are devices like the temp drop. That's the only one I can think of. It's a wearable thermometer, and so it takes your temperature throughout the night and gets your lowest temperature. So that's an option for postpartum moms. I've never personally tried it, but I know some women swear by it. Cervical fluid is going to tell you that your fertility was returning, or it's going to tell you if you're fertile. And so it's really good to, once you stop that postpartum bleeding, to start paying attention to your cervical fluid and to start charting that. My personal experience, once I stopped my postpartum bleeding, got my cycle back, I just had a lot of fertile cervical fluid. It was amazing, because I was man, if I was trying to make a baby right now, this would be a gold mine, because I've got so much just egg white, stretchy, good juicy cervical fluid. So even though I was still at a phase where I'm I don't want anything near my vagina, I also knew if it does come to that, we have to be super extra cautious because of all this fertile cervical fluid happening up in my business. I should have said this earlier, but I'll say it now. Breastfeeding does not equal birth control. This is definitely a misconception I had before getting pregnant. Just because you are exclusively breastfeeding and breastfeeding every 3 hours, 3 hours through the night, does not mean that you are infertile and you don't need to take other precautions. I was exclusively breastfeeding Theo and I got my cycle back at 10 weeks. So don't bank on breastfeeding as birth control because a lot of second or third children are conceived that way. The rules to charting postpartum before you get a regular cycle back are different than just when you have a regular cycle. And so I would definitely recommend, if this is kind of your first taste of charting as birth control, to work with an instructor, because it is just tricky when your hormones are all over the place and you don't have a consistent cycle. But if you've used charting in the past as birth control, I think you could effectively use charting postpartum as birth control as well. But if you don't feel comfortable with it or confident in your ability, definitely find someone to work with. Once your cycle returns to normal, you can go back to whatever charting method you'd been using before as birth control. I like the sympto-thermal method. I chart my basal body temperature and my cervical fluid, and I follow those rules for that specific method. And so it was very nice to be at 10 weeks with a regular cycle again before I even needed to use charting as birth control. The next thing I want to touch on is, just because it was really hard to conceive your first child does not mean that it will take the same amount of time and effort to conceive your second child. And vice versa. Like, if you got pregnant right away on try number 1 with baby number 1, doesn't mean that it will be that easy for baby number 2. I know people in both camps, got pregnant on the first time with baby number 1, and then it took them 2 years to conceive baby number 2. My point is, don't say like, oh, it took us 2 years to conceive Bobby Joe. We don't need to be that cautious because we're not that fertile. But you could also be of the mindset of, it took us so long to get pregnant with Susie Jean. If we get pregnant from this one time, I wouldn't hate that and it wouldn't be the end of the world. If you can't tell, Theo is Susie Jean. And that was my experience. I wasn't like so naive to think, oh, just because it took us so long to conceive Theo, it's going to take us that long to conceive baby number 2. Like, I did expect, because I like to like rationalize things as like worst case scenario or just like the most difficult scenario. That way when it's not, it's like a pleasant, fresh surprise. But it took us 11 months to conceive Theo. I had a blighted ovum miscarriage. It was super stressful. I had so much anxiety through that experience. It wasn't good on a relationship. It wasn't fun. It wasn't what I expected when it came to like conceiving and getting pregnant. And so when May rolled around and we had this slight hiccup in communication, and I was like, yeah, I'm in my fertile phase. I'm fertile right now. There's, a chance that a pregnancy could result from this. We had a conversation about it and came to the conclusion, it took us so long to conceive Theo. If a baby is going to come from this like one beautiful organic experience, so be it. And apparently making babies can be that easy. So don't assume that because it was really hard with number 1 that it's going to be really hard with number 2, or because it was really easy with number 1, it's going to be really easy with number 2. Each pregnancy and conception is its own unique experience. So this time was different. With Theo, definitely we were like, we are ready to start trying for a baby. Let me get my ovulation predictor kits to know exactly when I have my LH surge, and I'll chart my cycle to know when the best days are for us to have sex. So we weren't at that level of intention of trying for a baby. We are much more like, oh, if it happens, it happens. It's not the end of the world. We're kind of in that phase of life where babies are okay. So looking back, I am so grateful for this just easy experience conceiving. And like overall, I would say this pregnancy has just been really smooth, and I'm so grateful for that. I've had a couple little hiccups, but nothing like major, nothing like stressful or worrisome. So grateful for how easy this experience has been compared to everything with Theo. So while it was a slight hiccup in like communication, I don't necessarily consider it a method failure, because I knew where I was in my cycle. I knew I was fertile, and we had the conversation of where are we at with wanting a second child? Like, would it be okay if we did get pregnant from this, or do I need to go out and get plan B? So while it was a hiccup, I don't think it was a failure, because I still understood what was going on with my cycle and that I was fertile and that there was a chance that I could conceive from that encounter. Once again, birth control and conception is not as black and white as people may think it is. And the final thing I want to touch on today is, I think with any sort of birth control method, hormonal or otherwise, is you have to have clear communication with your partner about where you guys are in your relationship, where you are in the realm of like babies, and you know, what would happen if you did fall pregnant, even if you are using your birth control method perfectly. And especially with charting, you have to have that clear communication of, this is where I'm at in my cycle, this is how fertile I am. No, we can't have sex tonight because there's a chance it could result in a baby, but we can do other fun, sexy time things. Michael and I have been using charting as our birth control method our entire relationship. Gotten really attuned to just like unspoken communication when it comes to charting and my cycle and birth control. Anyways, that's what I have to say today about charting postpartum. No, I did not teach you how to chart postpartum because that cannot be taught in a video, and I think it would be irresponsible to try to teach it in a video. My advice is, if you have recently had a baby, or you are pregnant with your first child or second child or whatever, and you want to consider charting as a birth control method afterwards, this is a great time to start learning about it. Taking Charge of Your Fertility is a great book. Find an instructor. I will try to link some resources down below to find an instructor in your area, people you can work with online. I have a course you can take that it's more for like a beginner introduction into charting your cycle, and I don't think it would be the best fit for someone who is postpartum looking to chart. But if you're like new to charting, aren't pregnant, don't have like a postpartum cycle, you could take that and as an option. So what I'm saying is there are options out there. Just make sure that you're properly educated on charting your specific method and that you're following all of the rules and guidelines for that method that you're using. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye!